All right, big welcome back. And of course, I hope that you've had some amazing networking experiences over the last 60 minutes or so, met some good people, met up with some possible funders, strategic alliances. And this is what's been happening in these virtual spaces. Incredible opportunities have come about. And so I hope that you've taken that advantage. But as you know, it's only the first networking session. After this discussion, go back to networking. Use the opportunity. It's invaluable, and it really brings out amazing opportunities. But I'm really looking forward to the next discussion, of course, powered by Experian. And we're going to talk about the importance of understanding your credit health and, of course, what it can do for you and your business. And before I call Jaco up on stage, I just want to remind you that on floor 1 and on floor 2 is the Experian Lounge consultants, and these guys are professionals. They're there to assist you. They're there to help you get better credit scores. They're ready to give you the advice that you need. So please jump onto the Experian Lounge on either floor 1 and 2 and really engage with them. They're really here to help you this morning and of course throughout the show. But of course, let me not delay this any further. I'd like to call Jaco van Jaarsveldt, Experian, Head of Commercial Strategy and Innovation, Africa. Jaco, please join me on stage. I really look forward to this. Just waiting for Jaco to come on stage. Sometimes with, as we know by now, technical things. There it is. Jaco van Jaarsveldt. Jaco, very big welcome. I've had an amazing short discussion with you prior to this session. You're super passionate, you're super interesting, and I know that your insights are going to be highly appreciated by small business throughout the country. But Jaco, a big welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Jaco, before I kick off, I'd just like to, your role at Jaco, you can give a bit better description than I can. So give us an insight on what your role is at Experian.
So at Experian Africa, I look after commercial strategy and innovation for the Africa business. And in a nutshell, what that is, Mike, it's taking value out of the data that we get from consumers, turning it into something that the consumer and the business then owns themselves and uses it as a mechanism to get access to credit or insurance or funding. So it's very exciting with all the big data that we have available that's provided to us via the different credit providers that they get from consumers. We take that consumer data, turn it into value, and then play it back to a consumer, a small business, and clients to make consolidated decisions. So it's basically building ecosystems between credit provider, consumer, small business, and the credit bureau to make that entire credit journey simple and completely seamless.
Fantastic, Jaco. And Jaco, as you know, over the past year, the How to Be Financially Fit campaign, powered by Experian, has been seized so positively by small businesses and business owners who run these businesses. And it's really made a difference and an impact. You know, the important is what it can do for you, as you know, and, you know, access to funding, better trade terms, all comes as a result of an improved credit score. And today, again, and to continue the conversation, we're really going to help our people out there to really what they can do to really ensure that they've got a good credit profile, credit score, so that they can utilize it in their personal lives and business to be able to access funds, better trade terms. So again, the conversation goes. Now, Jaco, can you give us an update on the state of both consumer and business credit health in South Africa?
Yeah, and just before I jump into that, Mike, the great thing for us to work with you and the organization and small businesses, it's been an absolute pleasure because it aligns 100% with the Experian global ambition. From 2020 through the entire COVID pandemic, as an organization, we've set an ambition to create a more inclusive credit economy. That's for small business and for consumers. COVID has resulted in so many changes and impacts on the market that structurally there's been changes, and the way that consumers and small businesses get access to and actually use their data in a way that gives them value and benefit is fundamentally important going forward. and there's a change, but we'll discuss that in a bit more detail. In terms of what's happening with the consumer and the small business out there, I think whether it's small business or big business or consumer, it all starts ultimately with the demand from a consumer, right? Because without the consumer, neither the small or big business is going to make if you're in the service industry, if you're in the tertiary or secondary supply industry, doesn't really matter. You ultimately have a consumer at the end of your product. So from a consumer perspective, at the end of COVID, or when the market opened in December, there was actually some green shoots there in terms of the impact that COVID had on consumers in general was quite positive, in that the extra cash that consumers had that they couldn't spend during the lockdown, etc., resulted in a large pay down of debt. And that pay down of debt actually translated into fewer people being in distress and fewer people defaulting on credit simply because credit wasn't available and people paid down their loans. Unfortunately, we know what happened with the floods in April, and we know with the external environment that happened in Ukraine, and that has now put inflationary pressure across the whole world. So what we're seeing now is the effect of that coming through, and unfortunately, that impacts all consumers, whether it's your very top end of the market all through to the bottom end of the market. The bottom end is significantly impacted by cost of living, the inflationary impact on food, on electricity, on the bare necessities. And then the top end of the market, a very big popular portion of that top end of the market that got into the secured lending space, has never been exposed to the level of interest rates that I believe you and I were exposed to during the late 90s or the early 90s, when we were exposed to credit first. And I mean, the interest rates that we were then paying on secured lending products is 2-3 times higher than what the current population has ever been exposed to. So they've come through a very low interest rate environment. So they're under distress, and you can see it across the whole market, and it's getting worse and worse. That flows over to small businesses. Even though up until the last quarter, we've seen an improvement in our business default index or business debt index, the stress that we've seen post-COVID, where a number of small businesses couldn't get through it due to the demand, due to the consumers not being there, those that remained also had the ability to improve their financial health. But with this demand from a consumer perspective waning, it's starting to have a negative effect on small and large business. Even though the latest results that we see from retailers, from banks are really, really good, the future, however, is going to be challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Now, we've asked this question many times over the past year, and we're going to continue again to ask the question over the next year and beyond, is that please remind us, Jaco, why is it so important for SMEs to understand their credit profiles?
Yeah, and I think the starting point of understanding a credit profile, whether it's SME or consumer, is that all small business owners and all consumers alike should understand that a credit profile is actually a tool that is, if positively used by the consumer or the SME, is absolutely invaluable in growing your business and growing yourself as an individual and your financial capacity and your capabilities. And I think the starting point there is to say that that entire view that a credit bureau is bad and holds negative information only should completely be debunked from the word go. A credit bureau effectively is an organization that hosts the data. That's a central coordinator of all the credit data across all credit products. So all banks, all retailers, insurers, micro lenders, etc., provide on a monthly basis all their debtors book data into the credit bureau. And similarly, small businesses provides their financial data to a credit bureau of the bureau. That data is then taken by the bureau and consolidated at a consumer or SME level and value extracted from that data. And that to me is the most important point that the SME owners and the consumers need to understand. You own your data, and thus you are in full control of what that picture that's portrayed of you, whether individual or business, to a potential funder or to a bank that you want a loan from. You absolutely control it. And that is the wonderful thing about the whole mindset change that people should consider when they're looking at what a bureau presents to a financial organization on behalf of the small business and on behalf of the consumer. It is that data is owned by and controlled by the SME and the small business and the consumer. And that data, it's almost like an ecosystem between the consumer or the SME, the credit bureau being the coordinator of the data and simplifying the data, and then presenting it to the financier or the funder or the credit provider in a way that is easy to understand and easy to gain access to credit. And therefore, from a bureau perspective and a small business perspective, always make sure that you know what's on your bureau profile, but understand that you are in full control of that profile. You are in control of that data. The way that you manage it, the way that you change behavior, the way that you change the way you do things or your business does things, that has a direct impact on the data that's then coordinated by the bureau and portrayed to the financiers, the funders, or the banks. And the better you're in control and manage that data, the easier that entire engagement process with a supplier of funding becomes.
Yeah, like 100%. I think that's really important for all of us to understand, to change, if not already, to change that mindset towards credit bureaus from a negative to a positive, because it can do more good for you in your business than harm. So, and I think that I've learned that over the past year, be so closely involved in the campaign. And I think that so many other business owners have changed that mindset. And I think the drive will continue. And I think over the next year, that difference we will make will be even far more significant. Now, as you and I both know, Experian and Nsbc have enjoyed an amazing, meaningful partnership over the past year and beyond that, before that, and will continue into the beyond. Now, why is Experian working with the Nsbc to drive financial education to SMEs?
And again, it's incredibly exciting. It all comes back to what is it that the SME wants and needs to grow the business and create that capability that we so desperately need in the South African market, which is create employment, therefore creating economic growth and employment. And it is exactly that the focus of our partnership with yourselves is based on. Its education, support, and ensuring that we provide the tools necessary in partnership with the Nsbc to get it and provide that service into the SME industry to make sure that we empower the industry and empower small businesses and consumers alike, because there's a very strong correlation between a small business and the consumer profile of that small business owner, and empowering everybody jointly to build a mutually beneficial ecosystem that is then joint, that drives that growth in the bigger economy. Because ultimately, if our intention as the two organizations are to create this more inclusive credit economy, it's an inclusive credit economy for small businesses that then creates employment, that then creates an inclusivity from a consumer perspective. And the only way we do that is by working together and developing the required capabilities to do it. Now, this partnership with yourselves is fantastic in that we get to speak to the small business owners and we get to listen and hear at what it is that's needed and what they want. From an innovation perspective, the one thing that we do as Experian, without a shadow of a doubt, we don't develop solutions, services, or products as Experian for people. We develop it with people. We develop it with organizations. We develop it with consumers. We develop it with small businesses. And we'll touch on a consumer application that we're soon to launch that is equally beneficial to both consumers and SMEs. That was developed with consumers. We sat down and asked them, what is it that you need? And similarly, our partnership gives us that ability to sit with the SMEs and say, from very micro SMEs all the way to the bigger SMEs, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? And all we do then is we create that capability by using the underlying value that we have in that data and developing the capabilities with that data to streamline and simplify the access to funding and the growth in the market, accelerate that growth in the market.
Okay. So Jaco, that leads us to our campaign of how to become financially fit to maintain and grow your business. Jaco, please explain to us, how does credit wellness affect this?
Yeah, and I think the starting point of this, then, Mike, is very important. There's two things that defines credit wellness, and this is something that is important that all individuals need to understand. It's not just your credit profile. Two things work hand in hand, and that is your affordability or your cash flow or your ability to manage your debtors according to your contracts, so payment terms, and then your credit profile. The starting point is, do you as an individual, from an affordability and a cash or a SME, are you managing your facilities or your credit in an effective way? Because that translates into a payment profile, and that payment profile is reported via credit providers to the Bureau. When the data hits the Bureau, all that the Bureau does is it looks at, did Jaco pay his account? Did Jaco's business pay on the due date that they contractually had to, or is there in arrears? That data is then used to translate into a risk category or a risk score. It takes all that raw data, and it then builds a picture of a small business or a consumer to state this is a good credit risk or not a good credit risk, or a person that's in distress or not in distress. And that is the two fundamentally key components that people need to understand. The credit profile is not something that just happens. It's influenced by your behavior as a business or as a consumer. And that's why I started the conversation with you. Us as people, we control that profile in totality. That profile is not something that miraculously gets developed on the sideline and someone comes up with it. It's a function of your management of your finances, whether it's an SME or a consumer. And that's a function of cash flow, affordability, etc., etc. And therefore, when we start talking about credit education is less a function of look at your bureau record and go change it. It is change your behaviors, and your bureau record will change automatically thereafter. And that's why I start the conversation with a comment. We own our credit records. We own our credit profiles. We own our future. And therefore, how we control our behavior, or what we do from a behavioral perspective, is fundamentally critical in how it's then exposed to the funders, etc., out there.
Okay. So, Jaco, of course, we're closing in on, as you know, tomorrow is spring, and we're closing in on the 2023 season. And as we know, we'll be updating the campaign, the Financially Fit campaign, in January again. What are some of the key topics that Experian will cover and provide rich content on?
So there's a lot of focus on becoming financially fit, understanding how to manage your finances, education in terms of what data means to you and how valuable that data is and how it is used. Very important for us is to educate consumers and small businesses alike. Don't wait for to miss payments. There's ways to address and fix it beforehand that is positive for your cash flows and for your bureau profile, and subsequently for the future of your business. And then finally, it is, how do we help people understand what value data is to them as individuals? How valuable is your data? And when I talk data, Mike, I think there's this big buzzword going around the markets today. There's traditional data and there's alternative data. And we will discuss it later. But for everyone on this call to understand what alternative data is, where it comes from, and the amazing power that alternative data has. And you know what the great thing about that is, Mike? We own that data. We own it. We decide how it's used, by whom it's used, and how it's exposed. And that, to me, is fundamentally critical for people to understand, because data is your friend, because data provides insights, and your data is your power. So if you just control that data or provide that data to trusted partners, it's going to extract value for you from it. It helps you progress your business and yourself as a consumer going forward.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're 100%. Now, let's talk about financial inclusion. What's Experian's vision around financial inclusion?
Yeah, and that's extremely important. Our ambition at Experian is to build a more inclusive credit economy. And to put it in a bit of context, pre-COVID, there was a natural path that people got themselves into the credit industry as individuals. And then ultimately, if you've got a strong individual credit profile, it's easier to set up a small business, because there's a direct correlation or a reference. When small businesses are funded, they look at the directors or the owners of the business. So that first funding comes on the back of, well, how do you conduct your own credit? And if not, there's different ways of assessing it, but that's one of the core components that typical lenders would look at, or typical financiers will look at. And pre-COVID, there was a journey, a historic journey that over the last 10 years, 4 out of 10 people started their credit journey with a retail store card in South Africa. So people would typically go open a Foschini or a Truworths or a Jet card. And that card would then be with a limit of between 1,000 and 3,000 Rand. People will build up a credit record. That payment of that small amount of credit of installment would then build up a credit score. And banks would then wait 12 to 18 months and start offering banking products. And similarly, they'll start providing funding for loans. All financiers will provide funding for small business loans. When COVID struck and all retail stores and banks, etc., closed, it was one thing for a bank to go onto a digital experience because it's a transaction that provides money into an account and you can use the account. A retailer still needed people to come look at the stock, etc., and then they set up their digital platforms so you can do online shopping, etc. But typically in South Africa wasn't ready for that. So there was a lack of provision of credit, so the supply of credit disappeared. And post-COVID, the retailers have not returned back to the level of credit granting that they did before. So there's this entire gap in the market now in terms of credit supply and thus the migration from a retail to a bank card. Now, banks are struggling with this even because they don't have that source of new business coming from good performing retail accounts. Us as Experian look at this and say, well, we need to step into that gap. We need to make sure that the consumer is not left behind because the structural way of getting to credit has changed. And the way that we're approaching it is by saying, how do we partner with consumers? How do we partner with SMEs? Use the data that they have that's not typical credit data, so alternative data. And we'll discuss what alternative data means a bit later, but use that data to build a new reference towards a new credit risk reference mechanism that we then use the consumer data and the SME data in partnership with the SME and consumer, build this new credit mechanism that we then expose to financiers and to funders and to the credit provider, the banks, etc., as an alternate mechanism to grant credit. And the way we do that is, as I said, we partner directly with consumers, we partner directly with SMEs, and we say, give us the alternative data. We will take it in complete confidence, share it with nobody, build a value tool. That value tool will be to you as SME and you as consumer only, and you're in full control when that alternate mechanism is then exposed to a credit provider. In the background, we will go prove to credit providers who we work with today. We work with all the banks, all the retailers, all the insurance companies, all micro lenders. We already work with them. We will go show that this new mechanism has exactly the same benefit as a traditional score. But in order to get access to that, you need the permission of the SME or the consumer to get it. So what we make the consumer and the SME own their own data. And it's basically a tool that empowers the SME to get access to financial services that is completely different to the traditional way of doing it via credit mechanisms.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah. Now, Jaco, I know that Experian has developed an amazing app. Tell us about the app. Please tell us what it can do for small businesses. When will it be available? And of course, is it more than an app? I'm really interested to hear more on this.
Now, this is actually a journey we're going on with consumers and SMEs. It's very, very exciting. As I said, we developed this. We didn't develop an app to take to market. We developed an app based on the requirements and needs of consumers. And our next step is to build one in partnership with SMEs. So the first version of the app, we're actually very excited. We're heading to another organization that we've got very close ties with, Riza Babayile. We're going into Diepsloot tomorrow, where we're actually meeting with 50 micro entrepreneurs, female micro entrepreneurs, and we're launching the app to them and showing them the app and what the app is. And the app literally is a step-by-step education tool that also has included in it free access to your bureau report, free access to your credit score, education in terms of what it means, how it gets calculated, how you use it as an individual, how you use it as an SME. There's an SME component in there. And what do you need to do to improve it? There's a full end-to-end budgeting capability in there that pre-populates all your bureau expenses for you. So when you when you start completing your budget, you can put your income and expenses in, but your bureau expenses will be pre-populated. So you'll very quickly and immediately see what's on the bureau from an expense perspective, from an installment perspective. But you also have access to your full bureau report, all completely free, completely secure. Only you as an individual can log on to the app and get access to the information. The core objective of the app is to say to people, don't be afraid of a credit bureau. Let's explain what a bureau is. Let's explain what we do. Let's show you how we use the data. Let's show you what this data and the capabilities of your data means to you. And at the same time, we give you, the consumer and the SME, the option to say, share more than just traditional data with us. And we'll use the data we share, you give us, which is the alternative data. And that alternative data will be converted into an alternative risk mechanism that only you control. It's available only to you as the consumer or the SME. It's not available on the public. It's not available on the bureau to any credit provider. It's only available if you want to make it available. So you decide who you want to make it available to. What we do with your data is we collect it, we convert it into a value adding component. We say to you, if this has enhanced your bureau score by X%, and thus you are likely to get X, Y, and Z in terms of loans granted to you. So it's enhanced your profile. And then we'll say, do you want to apply for a loan with a credit provider? And then only will we make it available to that credit provider based on your engagement with them. So it's 100% focused on engagement, education, gaining additional data, and extracting value from your data. And if I may, and I mentioned to you earlier, I can talk a lot, so you're going to have to cut me off if you want me to.
No, go ahead.
That alternative data, I'll use an example. If any of the people on this call log on to whether it's Facebook, Twitter, whether it is any of the apps, and I'm not a millennial, so I don't know what all these apps are, but you log on to all these apps today, whether it's one of the Meta software platforms like Facebook, and I forget the other one's names, but anyway, you log on to them, they get your data. And when I say they get your data, they know exactly what your location is because they've got location data based on the device that logged on. Whatever activity you do on that site, they follow what you do. And when I say follow what you do, they know what you search. They know what favorites are. Otherwise, they'll never be able to push those ads to you that is those so personal. So they've got algorithms running in the background based on your behavior on that. Consumers and SMEs get zero in return for that. Zero. What we want to do is we want to say, when you come through our app, we will also collect that data. But we'll take that data, turn it into value, and give it back to you to take as a mechanism to access credit. And then when that credit is accessed via a credit provider, you will be rewarded for that data. So start monetizing your data. You're getting zero today for it. So our entire intention in the medium term is to say, as we get more and more, as we scale the use of the app that we actually take into market the middle of October. So we're launching to a small population at the end of September, and then to your user group, the whole Nsbc population, we'll be looking at mid to late October. We'll actually be push notifying all the members that want it and sign up to it. We'll push a SMS to where you can then open, download, and register on the app. As we build scale and volume, we start creating these new mechanisms that is an indicator of your ability to pay, to be a good credit risk, but it doesn't use credit data. It uses completely different data in terms of behavioral data, association data, etc. But you own it. It doesn't go beyond us in your relationship. That's it. Only when you say make it available because I want to apply for credit at Bank A, will Bank A see that data, will Bank A see that credit mechanism and that data. And then when Bank A grants you the loan and we facilitate that loan, we will reward you for that data and sharing the data with us. So the entire mechanism is to say, own your data, get paid for your data and commoditize your data. But those are the two small things. The big thing is that data can unlock so much value for you as a business. And that is important. So the entire journey for us and the process that we're following is, let's work with consumers and SMEs, sit down with them, tell us what you want, and we will develop it and incorporate it into the future components of the app. This app is a live thing. As consumers and SMEs say, I want another component, and it is in demand, we will go develop it and we'll add it, and we'll continuously add components, but not what we think is good. What the SMEs out there we work with and what the consumer out there is that we work with, what they want, we'll put in it.
Jaco, super exciting stuff, and well done on this. And just in a nutshell, are you saying that this will be available to our SMEs around October, November this year?
Yes. The discussions and the plan is we'll take it to a small portion of consumers first, and it's internal consumers that actually have access to our My Credit Check product. And My Credit Check, as you said, on the first and second floor, there's Experian consultants that can sit with individuals and take you through the credit profile. You'll have to register in your personal capacity, though, because it is, from a POPIA perspective, you as an individual have to do it. And once you register on a My Credit Check, you will be the first people that will have this app sent to you and say, here you go, use the app and tell us what you think. Tell us what you want to add. Tell us how you want us to change it. The second group of people that will then take it is partners, and we'll bring it to Nsbc and say to your members, here you go, tell us what you would like from an SME perspective. Because what you tell us, we incorporate into our development path in terms of these are the next components we'll be launching. We'll develop it, launch it. And the great thing with this app is low data. It's not an app that you download from an app store. It's literally a click and a link to a website. But the website displays on a phone and a computer exactly the same. So it's low data, low cost, easy incorporation of other components through technical things that I don't really care about. The clever guys do that in the back end. What we just do is, what do you want? We'll develop it, we'll put it in, and we'll make this app give you value as a consumer and an SME. And it's all focused on a partnership. We do it together. We help you own your data. We help you monetize your data. We help you get access to credit. That's what we're looking forward to do in partnership with yourselves.
Super amazing, Jaco. Thank you for that. Now, Jaco, what personal advice would you give to our SMEs regarding becoming financially fit?
I think, as I mentioned, there's two components, but the one leading component is manage your finances effectively. And when I say manage your finances effectively, the general broad comment that everyone provides, consumers and SMEs out there, is make sure you pay your accounts on time, make sure you service your contracts on time according to the payment terms that you've got, and make sure that you pay it in full. That's easier said than done when the market gets tough. Now, remember, there's two things. There's the outcome of your payments, which is your affordability, your cash flows, your ability to manage your finances, which then translates into a payment report that's given to a credit bureau that's then used to predict and project what your credit status is. So if you can't make the payment, your credit status will deteriorate. It's an outcome of you not something will result in your credit profile getting worse. You're in full control. My biggest advice to any SME out there and any consumer out there is, when you're in financial distress or when you start experiencing it, you don't have to wait to get into arrears before you start doing something about it. The easiest way to it is look at your credit record, at your profile, and look at all the exposure that you've got, all your creditors, and go, which don't I need? And I'll use an example as from a consumer perspective. If you've got 3 personal loans as a consumer, you pay 3 instances of 3 installments. Each of them have a different interest rate linked to them. Each of them have a different outstanding balance. And each of them you're paying a credit life insurance premium on. So you've got 3 of everything. Nothing prevents you from looking and consolidating it into a single loan. And then reducing your fees, because it's 1 loan with 1 set of service fees instead of 3 sets of service fees. 1 loan with 1 credit life insurance to insure the outstanding debt. And when you consolidate whilst in a good credit position, you can get a lower interest rate when you consolidate it. And therefore, you release cash flow and you increase your ability to finance and service this debt. And the same goes for SMEs. If you don't need that data, or you can consolidate facilities, consolidate them into a single facility with a single fee. Those fees and those ancillary fees and ancillary products that you have for each loan, that you have to take for each, add up. Just get one of each. And once you consolidate that, it's always easier to consolidate before you get into financial distress, because the moment you get into financial distress, there's fewer organizations, that will consolidate that debt. So my biggest word of advice is don't wait for it to get bad. You know when it's becoming difficult. Start engaging in the educational component here is what we're trying to do through our app is what can you do to improve it? How do you repair your credit before it gets into an unrepairable state? Because when it gets into an unrepairable state, you've just, no matter what data you provide, you've got a bad record because you've missed payments, and it's very difficult to then over time get out of it. It takes a long time for that to get removed from your profile. So biggest word of advice, before it gets unbearable, start doing something. Don't be afraid to take control of your finances. Don't. There's loads of organizations that will consolidate loans at a better interest rate. There's demand. There's huge demand out there to consolidate loans. All banks will do it for you. Take control of your finances, because the moment you take control of that and your cash flows improve, your ability to finance your debt, to fulfill your debtors' obligations and your credit obligations, the better your credit report will become anyway, and then you'll easier get access to finance.
Yeah, enormous advice. Thank you, Jaco. Now, I know you've touched on this, but is there any further practical advice and tips for building a good credit reputation, both from a personal and business perspective?
Yeah, it's literally the data that's shared with the Bureau is financial data. So it's literally which accounts you have, which accounts you pay them. There are some factors that has a negative impact. People that shop around for credit a lot. So if you inquire at 20 different organizations for credit and you don't take up that credit, each inquiry is logged on the credit bureau, because that credit provider will go to the bureau to assess whether they will grant you credit or not by looking at this credit information that's on the back of what you do as a consumer, right? So if you're looking for credit and you shop around, make sure that you don't shop around at 20 credit providers and then don't take the credit or take one. There's a number of platforms out there that will give you the functionality and the capability to see which organization will give you the best package without going to the bureau. And those are typical platforms that you should use that doesn't go to the bureau immediately and it creates this inquiry on the bureau, because multiple inquiries with no credit granted is also a red flag to a lot of institutions in terms of, well, if Jaco applied at 5 credit providers and none granted, why should I as the 6th? And therefore, when you apply, make sure you're doing it for a reason and for a purpose. Don't just do it for fun. And then also, creating a bureau record is also very important. Even if you don't have credit today, understand that when you apply for any facility, the first thing credit providers do is they call the credit bureau. And if you don't have a credit record and they create that credit record because of the inquiry coming to the bureau from them, you're very unlikely to get credit. So that's another purpose of our app. As it is an educational app, we're not targeting credit active SMEs and credit active individuals at all as a specific. We're sending it out there to any consumer, whether you have credit or not. The intent is education. The moment you register on the app and you give permission, we create that bureau profile. And we then say, right, even if you now are going to apply for credit, we'll have that profile. We'll have your contact details. We'll have your ID. We'll have your home address. The more information you share, the more information we have to build up a preliminary bureau profile of you as a consumer. And then when you apply for credit and that credit provider comes in and they say, Jaco has just applied for credit and you've created your credit application through this app, your credit profile through the app, they can validate that Jaco's address is correct. Jaco's email address is correct. It's on the bureau. Immediately, that creates a fundamentally different view of you as a consumer or a SME than there is no bureau information. So again, it comes down to use it to your advantage. Do not be afraid. This whole view that credit bureau, they're not. Credit bureau consolidate, use your data to extract value for you as a consumer.
Yeah, and Jaco, it's a good question. Yeah, you get a youngster coming out of varsity and they get the first job, they're about to get a first check account. Can they approach like Experian and get a credit profile?
you register on our app, and when you register on the app that we're launching, it will be very, very strict POPIA regulations that we apply. It sounds a bit crazy that you're going to have to tick a lot of boxes, but it's to protect you as a consumer. And we explicitly ask there, do you give us permission to use your information that you shared with us to create a bureau profile? If the answer is yes, we create the bureau profile. If the answer is no, we don't. Do you give us permission to use this data? No, we don't. Yes, we do. Do you give us a permission to use the data that we collect while you're on our app to build alternate profiles? All this data completely confidentially used between us and yourself and not exposed to anybody out there. It's purely just between us, and we control it very securely. And if you say no, we don't. If you say yes, we do. And that's the mechanism. Understanding that when you register on the app, we've got this whole educational process, which is a gamified process called Galeza, where we take you through. We've got 20 courses on different components, and there's 1 or 2 on SMEs as well, where we give advice through education and a gamified process where you get stars and benefits all going through it. The intent, especially when you mention someone coming out of university, don't just go apply for credit. Download the app, understand what it means, understand the power you hold in your data before you go there. Because when the thing that we want, Mike, and I'm super passionate about, I want consumers and SMEs to walk into a credit provider and own that conversation. You own it. You own your data. You know what your data says. You know what you're good for. You know what you can qualify for. You don't need someone to say, let me go see. Nothing would give us as an organization greater pleasure to build an inclusive credit economy in partnership with consumers, SMEs, and credit providers, and facilitate that conversation, that when that conversation happens, it's one of mutual respect and one of, I know I have a score of this that would get me a loan of 20,000 Rand at an average interest rate of anything between 8 and 10%. Will you give it to me? As opposed to, can I have credit? Please tell me what I have to pay. You walk in with the tools, and you can have that conversation far more constructively. And for students, download the app, understand that, own your data, and go have that constructive conversation.
It's powerful. Yeah, own it. I love that, Jaco. Thank you for that.
Own your data.
Now, the big question is now, before I ask it, I'll know, to all our attendees out there, please meet the Experian team. They're on floor 1, floor 2, based on this discussion and other factors you might want to discuss. And again, how can our members, our SMEs, get their personal and business credit reports from Experian right now? Have I answered that for you, Jaco, on the floor, or how else can they get those reports?
So the consultants will absolutely help them and give them the insights. But for us, it's pretty simple. The process to get your business credit report is for all the owners to complete the Experian questionnaire that they get from yourselves, Mike, the Nsbc, on your Nsbc website. They submit that questionnaire and that report to the businessinfo@experian.com. And again, it will be available from the consultants, but that's businessinfo@experian.com. That information is then consolidated at a bureau level, set up, and that's the starting point. We then use that data to start building that profile for a small business, and it's extremely powerful. And think about this. The more of your P&L that you share your P&L, monthly P&L with us. That data is super, super, super powerful because it shows how you're paying your debtors every month. It gives so much insights that when you then walk into a credit provider and we display that to the credit provider, we've consolidated all that historic information of yours into a single mechanism that provider or financier will just go, Mike is good for credit because I've got the singular view of that consumer or the SME.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jaco. So thank you for that. And but we're coming to almost at the closure, Jaco, but an important question for you is, how can an individual or business raise a dispute for incorrect information on their credit reports?
Again, the process is pretty simple. You go straight to the credit bureau and you call the bureau or you contact, and again, our consultants will share the details of it, and we'll share it via the chat as well in terms of contacting the bureau. And that dispute is then treated by our agents at the bureau. So you contact the bureau on the number that we'll share in the chat. And again, the great thing with downloading the app, there's a dispute process included. So if there's a dispute, remember when you download the app, when we give you access to the app, we expose your bureau profile to you. When you see the bureau profile, you see your installments, you can see whether that's yours or not. There's a mechanism then to contact that the call center, and the call center at the bureau will help you address and resolve that dispute immediately.
No, thank you for that. And I know a lot of people didn't believe that they could achieve that. And again, coming to that statement, you own your own credit report, and if something's wrong, get it changed quickly. So thank you, Jaco. Now, the final big question is, Jaco, what are you hoping will come out of this ongoing financially fit campaign?
To build that more inclusive credit economy, Mike. And I think we have an equal passion to build small businesses. We all know that the future of this economy is small business, micro entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. That's the only way we create employment in this market. It's not going to happen through the formal sector like it did 30, 40 years ago. The entire success of this South African economy is based on the success of the micro entrepreneurs and the small businesses and entrepreneurs. That's it. Every small business we get set up that employs 2 or 3 people is 2 or 3 more people employed. Our ambition and our partnership with you is 100% focused on engaging with you, engaging with your members in building the capabilities and the tools to empower small businesses to grow and then create employment. And then we build a stronger economy in South Africa. Because as we sit here today, we know it's not just going to happen unless we do it ourselves. And the only way we do it ourselves is through small business growth.
Jaco, 100%. Jaco, I love your passion, your insights, hugely meaningful. I know you've made a massive difference here this morning, and all the replays over the months to come, we will continue to make a much bigger difference. So Jaco van Jaarsveldt, Experian, Head of Commercial Strategy and Innovation, a very big thank you to both yourself personally and to Experian for, of course, hosting this and, of course, being part of and powering up the Financially Fit campaign. And we're really grateful, and the impact has been enormous and will continue to be enormous. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a great pleasure and a real honor. Thanks very much.
Take care. And to all our attendees out there, please stay with us. Powerful networking on the go now until our next engagement at 1 o'clock. And really, there's some amazing people on the floor. Meet with the Experian team, all the other partners. A great opportunity to meet with other business icons, fellow entrepreneurs, people who are seeking out solutions. Just jump around the tables, catch someone that meets your interest, engage, build a relationship, move on. So a very big thank you again. That's from me for a while. Take good care and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.